Happy Friday, everyone. And I want to start today by talking about a case type that I get a lot. It's one of our common cases that we do. It's also one of my favorite cases for so many reasons. And that case is the marriage-based adjustment of status. Today, what I want to talk to you about are common mistakes that people make when they file these kinds of applications. But let's first kind of talk to you briefly about who qualifies for a marriage-based adjustment of status and what really do I even mean when I say marriage-based adjustment of status. So this is the best example, right? Somebody is maybe here on a student visa and they meet somebody in their university who happens to be a US citizen. They want to settle, they want to live in the US, they get married, and the citizen spouse has to apply for the non-citizen spouse for them to get a green card or a permanent resident card. That is the, one example of marriage-based adjustment of status. There are so many benefits to marriage-based adjustment of statuses, but today I'm not going to talk about the benefits. I'm going to talk about when people make mistakes, when they file these, what are the most common types of mistakes that people make. So who makes these mistakes? Sometimes it's lawyers. Sometimes it's, people self-filing and, just not going about it the best way. Now, we've done so many of these cases that we've kind of gotten a hint of what are some of the most common mistakes that people make. So the first most common mistake that I see people make is they don't provide enough information or context when they prepare their marriage-based adjustment of status case. So let me explain what that means. Basically, the forms that you fill out, people follow the instructions on the USCIS website, and they literally think that you just have to follow the instructions, fill out these forms, and, which one of us has not filled out forms, right? Well, we've all filled out so many forms, it should be pretty straightforward, you think. So I've got some news for you. Forms are just the beginning, okay? It's kind of like a job application. You fill out your form, but just because you filled out a job application doesn't mean you got the job, because the evaluation of it is only beginning with the form. It's based on so much more, right? So what are some of the things that they base it on is context. When you provide your information for the forms, is the information properly connected? Are there gaps in the information that are not properly explained, right? So context is key. If you're not providing enough context, if you're not providing enough information, then you are missing the chance to make this a smooth process. That's one of the first mistakes I see people make. Now, interestingly, the second mistake that people make is providing too much information. Now, you're going to say, is there even such a thing as too much information? Yeah, there is, actually. Because when you want to think about your adjustment of status case, you want to think about it like as if it was a conversation. You're having a conversation with the officer. So when you have a conversation with somebody says to you, hey, what's up? How are you doing? If you sit there and have a 20-minute long list of every single thing you did that day, the person's going to regret ever asking you the question. So think about it that way. Providing too much information is as damaging as not providing enough information. So when you're having a conversation, your trust, the smooth conversation is based on having the right quantity and quality of information at the right time. right? So if somebody asks you a question, you don't want to provide a one-word answer, but you also don't want to provide a whole story when a short sentence is enough, right? So that's what happens when people put in, just mountains and mountains of documents, 200 pictures, albums of their, every ceremony that they did in their wedding. This is too much information, right? So providing the right amount of information at the right time, just like any conversation that you have, that is key when it comes to these cases. So think about these cases like you would a conversation, okay? Now, this is the other mistake that people make, not understanding the questions behind the questions. What does that mean, right? So basically, when somebody asks you, even something simple, like what's your name, right? Somebody asks you, what's your name? Depending on when they're asking you, who's asking you, what is the surrounding context of their asking you that question, the answer will be different or maybe different, right? Like they ask you, what's your name? You bumped somebody into on the street and they said, hey, what's your name? Maybe they're asking you because they think they've seen you somewhere, right? Or know you from someplace. Or maybe they're filling out a form and they're just wanting to know the exact name so that they can fill it into the space, right? Maybe it's a legal form and they want to know your legal name, your complete legal name, right? Or maybe they're trying to understand where you're from, right? So just even a simple question like, what is your name, can have a different question behind the question. Keep in mind, these immigration forms come from the code and the law, right? So simple immigration questions have questions behind questions. An example is things like your address history. So you provide your address history, right? But do you want to provide your permanent address? Do you want to provide the address where you were, studying in dorms? What if you were staying with a cousin for 2 months? Or what if you were traveling? Do you want to provide that? It depends on why the address history is being requested. That is the question behind the question. And the question behind the question, the why, is what determines what the answer is, right? So the problem is that a lot of people who have not studied this in the legal sense do not know what is the question behind the question. So they take their best guess and maybe it's correct, maybe it's not correct, right? That is one of the most common mistakes that I see people make. Now, another really common mistake that people make is not providing the right amount of supporting documents. What does that mean? What are some of the supporting documents? You have your, birth certificate, marriage certificate, passport, but do you provide your old passport too, or just your new passport? What if you never got a birth certificate? Then what do you replace it with? And how many secondary pieces of evidence do you include, right? Do you provide your divorce decree? Do you also provide the marriage certificate from the previous marriage, right? Those are supporting documents. And providing the correct supporting documents and the right amount is very important, right? This is where there's some variation. People, for example, right? You want to prove that you have a good faith marriage. So you provide pictures, you provide bills, you provide, places, trips that you've taken before. But how much of it do you need to provide? How many bills do you need to provide? Every single month, ever? Some months, most recent only? Or in how many pictures, right? So the right quantity and the right quality of supporting documents is really important. There is such a thing as too many and too few, okay? This is a huge one. The next one is a huge problem. And the next one actually causes a lot of pretty big problems in the case sometimes, okay? And that is being inconsistent. What does that mean? And what does it mean to be inconsistent when you're just filling out a bunch of forms? I mean, how could you be inconsistent, right? No. So being inconsistent means that you basically have information, whether it's in the forms or in the supporting document, that does not add up, right? So what happens if in your address history section, your address history for May of 2012 shows that you were in Illinois, but in your travel history section or in your supporting documents, you provide evidence that in May of 2012, actually, you went to visit your home country for several months. You were not even in the United States. So now you have two pieces of information that you provided that contradict each other. That is inconsistent. Okay, and inconsistencies in immigration cases create problems. They create slowdowns. They create issues at the interviews. They create really long wait times, RFEs, denials, right? That is huge. Being consistent across the board is very, very important. Okay, so these are the most common problems that I see people make in their marriage-based adjustment cases. Let me know if these tips have been helpful. You can avoid these problems. And feel free to visit our website, www.SwagatUSA.com. And also feel free to call us if you have any questions. We can talk to you about your situation. We can look into your papers. We can review your cases. My name is Dhenu Maru, and my phone number is 312-854-7065. I wish you all best of luck. I hope you avoid some of these mistakes that I see happen so often. And happy weekend.